Welcome to the American Institute of Stress's official podcast, Finding Contentment. The goal of this podcast is to highlight new information about stress and stress management techniques. While we understand that stress is a very personalized issue and different for everyone, we hope to help you find your own way to contentment.
Hey, greetings, everybody. Welcome back. This is your host and Executive Director for the American Institute of Stress. It's Will Heckman. Thanks once again for joining us. If you've been a listener or a watcher before, you know this show talks about stress and stress-related issues. I just want to remind everybody, please remember to subscribe to our free magazines. All you have to do is go to stress.org. In fact, Contentment just came out with a brand new issue. It's really, really good. And don't forget to send in those reviews and comments. And if you're watching us, I'm going to ask you to do, once again, what I always ask you to do. Hey, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. Makes me feel good. I see likes. It makes my whole day. All right, so today we're talking about something very important. It's not something that is new because it is such an ongoing problem, and that's about the impact of mental health and safety in our workplace. Stress in the workplace has led to significant increase in mental health issues. Nearly half of Americans in the Kaiser Family Foundation poll said that their mental health took a turn for the worst. And in April 2020, the month after the coronavirus infested the U.S., this came out, the substance abuse and the mental health service hotline experienced a 1,000% year-over-year increase. That's astounding. That's a pandemic in itself. And to help relieve some of that stress, many organizations already recognize the value in supporting their workers' mental health through their employees' benefit programs. In fact, more than 8 in 10, 80% say their employers will provide at least one mental health offering, according to a report that was commissioned by the American Heart Association. But those same employees also said they wish that their employees did more. One of the most important issues for employees and for everyone else is to feel safe where they work. So joining us today is going to be Yasmine Mustafa. Now, Yasmine is a social entrepreneur and the CEO of Roar for Good. She was fueled by a passion to leverage technology for good. She leads the Roar team in their mission to cultivate a safer workplace and empower communities. And she's dedicated to fostering inclusive opportunities in business and education. And Yasmine draws upon her own experiences as an immigrant and a woman in tech to create platforms for conversation and igniting change. In addition to Roar for Good, Yasmine launched the Philadelphia chapter of Girl Develop It, which is a nonprofit providing affordable opportunities for women to learn software development. And she also serves on the board of Coded by Kids, which is great. It's a great nonprofit providing free tech education for inner city youth. And she's been recognized by the BBC, CNBC, Upstart 100, Philadelphia Magazine, the Philadelphia Business Journal, Technically Philly, and the city of brotherly love itself, Philadelphia. Also, she's a two-time TEDx speaker, and she has a roster of speaking credits that I'm not going to read now. In fact, if you want to learn more about Yasmine and all that she does, go to roarforgood.com. roarforgood.com. I'll put it down there so you guys can see it. So please join me in welcoming our guest today, Yasmine Mustafa. Hi, Yasmine.
Thank you. Hi. I think my stress went up as you were reading my bio. Is that possible?
The thing is, and I've said this before, people have said that. I cut it like a lot of, you have to actually do that stuff. I only have to read it. You actually have to do all that stuff. So your stress levels should not go up because you've accomplished all that. If it was a to-do list, that I'd understand. Okay. So, Yasmin, your journey to becoming the CEO and co-founder of Roar is very interesting. It's very compelling. And I've heard it before, but I want our listeners to hear it. Tell us about your journey. How you got to where you are.
Sure. Yeah. A lot of people say my story is really interesting, and it's an odd thing to hear when it's your life. But I I am a refugee of the Persian Gulf War. So I was 8 years old in Kuwait when Saddam invaded the country for its oil. And there was one day where I was in a bomb shelter with my mom, my dad, and my siblings. And all of a sudden, these two US ambassadors burst through the door looking for my baby brother, who had just been born in the States 9 weeks prior. And they told us we had an hour to pack 2 bags among the 8 of us, put us on a plane, and brought us to Philadelphia. This was September 1st, 1990. So 32 years ago at this point. And as I'm sure you can imagine, very scary experience to have. And as a little kid coming here, it was an eye-opening journey. I didn't speak the language, I didn't know the culture. In Kuwait, everyone looked like me. I'd never seen anyone with different colors, different facial expressions. It was just really wild and really exciting. And then when I was in high school applying for college, I learned I was undocumented. So unfortunately, even though we had been brought over by the embassy, something slipped through the cracks, and I did not have the social security number I needed to apply for college or get a driver's permit, license, and get a job. And that was very stressful, as you can imagine, because I felt like I had to live in secret and not tell other people about my situation for fear that maybe they'll report me while I desperately wanted to integrate and stay in this country. And the unfortunate part is the process to become a citizen had restarted. When I was 18, my father just kind of got fed up with the immigration system, hopped on a plane, and on the way to the airport, stopped by the bank and took all the family savings with him, leaving us to fend for ourselves. So a lot of experiences of fear and uncertainty, walking on eggshells, and stress, as you can imagine, through all of that. And
Actually, I can't imagine that. And that's the
yeah,
truth. You talk about that and you say, well, you must know how it felt. We have no idea. I have no idea
yeah,
how you felt. I realize what a stressful and traumatic thing that is to go through. My family went through similar things during World War II. But to have to leave your country and pack up and go to become a stranger in a foreign land, I'm surprised you didn't suffer from PTSD from that. I might have. And you
I
might have.
did actually. I
Yeah,
went to therapy.
good.
I went to therapy for it, but yeah, it was very stressful time. When my dad left, it ended up that all of us didn't have much choice but to get under the table jobs,
Mm.
and really anything that we would get. And my focus was on hospitality. So I worked in restaurants, I worked at dry cleaners, anyone who would pay me cash under the table. And as a result, I worked in a lot of unsafe working conditions. So these are the jobs people didn't want. These were the jobs where for 10 years, I made $5 an hour.
Yeah.
I couldn't get more because I didn't have the status. And unfortunately, my bosses sometimes would feel emboldened knowing that I couldn't report them or couldn't do anything, that I was stuck in my circumstances, and would say and do very inappropriate things. There was a lot of sexual harassment in those industries, and very common, unfortunately. All of that fueled my work today. So I don't want to gloss over the trauma at all, because a lot of work went into being able to unpack all those experiences. But my focus as a result of those experiences, I don't want anyone to be afraid while trying to earn a wage.
And I've worked in the restaurant business for many years. I even owned a
Yeah.
restaurant. And you're right, it is a hotbed for employee abuse. It just is. It's a very transient kind of business to begin with. And so the bosses, I have no doubt took advantage of it. And you speak a lot about the stress of a negative work environment, especially that when it's related to violence. Now, I understand that. I have a lot of friends who are first responders. I have a lot of friends who are in fields that are inherently dangerous. So their work environment sometimes involves violence, to be expected. But there's a lot of fields where that's not expected. And a couple of them that you spoke about, and I would love you to tell us about those fields and what the most common issues that you hear about.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the first industry we tackled was hospitality. So hospitality as in hotels and restaurant workers, specifically though more focused on hotels. And that is because 58% of housekeepers experience sexual harassment on the job from a guest. So unfortunately, the socioeconomic differences, again, people feel emboldened to say and do things that shouldn't be said. They will ask for special massages. They will open the door without clothes on. And much worse, that I don't know if I can say.
No, go ahead. Listen, if it helps somebody listening to this show who's been through this, I'm all for it. I'm sure I can't imagine some of the things that they've experienced.
Yeah, it's a lot. They deal with a lot, and hotel workers, just by the nature of their job, are just much more likely to be injured than other service sector workers. You know, they're constantly twisting, bending, pulling, pushing, and so they're much more likely to have back injuries as a result. Hospitality, what's been really interesting about it is that there has been hotel panic button laws sweeping the country, mandating that hotel owners equip their staff with buttons because of these incidences. So because when there's an injury due to their job or they're harassed by a guest, they can push a button and get someone to their location. So that's been really wonderful to see over the last few years. And then with healthcare, we're specifically focused on behavioral health. So drug addiction, psych wards, community health centers. They are more than 4 times more likely to experience workplace violence than any other occupation. And it's just staggering. One of the things I like to say that people don't believe is that nurses and doctors are more likely to be attacked than police officers and prison guards. Can you imagine that?
Yes, I can. And I was going to ask you specifically about nurses, because I have friends who are nurses.
Yeah.
I have friends who are policemen, and I have friends who are prison guards. And I do hear it more often from nurses. And one of the, it was very enlightening when they told me about that. I didn't understand it. And I think a lot of us and the people listening don't really understand. Like I said, you expect, okay, a police officer, a prison guard, they're in an environment that's inherently stressful because of the opportunities for violence or for whatever. But you don't think of those things in other fields, like hospitality, like being a nurse. But I've had nurses tell me that they're not armed. They're not even trained for that stuff. Not most of them.
Yeah, and what's great, it's becoming more common. What's really interesting about nursing in particular is that there's almost a perfect storm of things happening that's leading to this violence. You mentioned earlier, mental health is just all-time high. It's substance abuse, all-time high. And so people are coming in with altered senses of mind. And unfortunately, that can lead to accelerating incidents. And these nurses, because they're the front line, they're the first folks that they see, bear the brunt of that. And that's on top of the labor shortages and the burnout and the exhaustion that these nurses are experiencing in the first place, not to mention the rise of incivility that they have to deal with as well. I mean, they want from being heroes to being villains during COVID, and they've never been as exhausted as they are now. And what's happening is that they're getting spat on, they're getting choked, they're getting hit, they're getting kicked and punched. And it's not just coming from the patients, but the families of patients as well.
I'm sorry, I'm amazed. for those of you listening and hearing me stutter, I am just so amazed. Nurses have literally saved my life. I have nothing but the utmost respect for them. I don't understand how, first of all, how this can happen, and second of all, how we could allow it to happen. When I was a police officer and occasionally had to take someone to the hospital, sometimes in handcuffs, and the nurses would work on them, God forbid if they looked at them, the nurse wrong. I would never allow such a thing. I don't know how that's happened now. And what you mentioned, what happened during COVID to nurses and how the point of view changed. I've talked to nurses, their stress levels were unbelievably high, so much so that they were impossible to cope with. So they just left. Imagine what we would do. We did a show recently speaking to a young lady who was a doctor and deals with doctors who burn out. Same thing.
Yeah.
What are we going to do when they all leave?
And it's dangerous, right? Because hospitality and healthcare right now are experiencing the most severe labor shortages. People don't want to go back to work in hospitality. They don't want to deal with rude and unruly customers anymore. They don't want to deal with all these constant schedule changes. They don't want to deal with the rising incivility that's going on. And then same thing for healthcare workers. It's at a point now where I've actually heard some of our customers have to shut down certain rooms and not offer them, even though they have capacity, because they don't have the workers to fulfill them. And same thing for clinics. I have heard that they have not been able to fill up all their beds, even though there's demand, because they just don't simply have the workers. So something needs to change across both of these industries to address workplace violence, to make sure people want to work on those jobs.
Right.
And they're there because they're immensely important for us to function as a society and to be healthy.
And, it's funny, because one of the questions I wanted to ask you is the consequence of a stressful work life. And related to all this, I mean, there are so many consequences that we don't foresee. When we don't deal with the stress that workers are under in every field, just as a person, forget that they're a nurse, forget that they're, bringing me my wings or whatever, forget that they're a housekeeper. They're a person, and their work life has become so stressful, they don't want to go to work. Being a teacher for so many years, I have seen teachers carried out on a stretcher from a school because they just had a nervous breakdown from the stress. And, so the consequences of all this and all the things that you hear and you deal with needs some really deep thought. We need to really consider it.
Yeah.
And not just by employers, but by you and me when we go out, when we deal with a nurse. But there must be some industries that are addressing this. I know mental health has become at least more in focus for some employers. But what industries are really addressing these issues? You mentioned one of the things that hotels are doing, which I thought was just outstanding. Never panic button.
Yeah, well, first of all, did you say you were a police officer and a teacher? Yeah. I was like,
I'm really old. I was a police officer in the 80s. I would not be able to be a police officer now.
Got it.
I belong to a club that has military firefighters and cops. It's a motorcycle club. And so I hear all the time the kids, talking about their job or what they do today. Firefighters, the paramedics, the police. I could not do it now.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it.
I can understand.
So,
yeah, like you said, I think it's interesting to really dive into the consequences of a stressful work life, because it doesn't just stay on the job. It comes home with you. And the cycle is vast because it affects your family, your partner, your neighbors, your communities, and it
children.
It keeps going.
Yeah.
And for us, what we've seen in hospitality and in healthcare, and I think healthcare, I'll start there because it's interesting. They're both interesting, really, is they have PTSD when there's a violent incident. That trauma will stay with them, especially after they've been assaulted. They will have anxiety, depression, burnout. it hurts not just their morale, but it reduces productivity. It reduces creativity in terms of problem thinking. They become more distracted. And if you think about that in a healthcare setting, well, here they are taking care of patients, which then leads to less quality patient care, which can then lead to lawsuits to their employers. And so it's important to think about and consider just the severe tangible and intangible consequences of having a stressful work life. But it is promising what companies are doing now, and especially because of COVID, where if you're not taking care of your employees like you should be, they are less likely to work for you. It's going to be much tougher for you to be able to recruit. And we've been able to see that there, at least in the industries that we serve, it used to be that something had to be mandated for workplaces to implement policies. So construction, it wasn't until there were a few deaths that they required the hard hats.
That OSHA came in.
Yes.
Yeah.
So OSHA's been the one that's driving and has historically led safety initiatives in the workplace. But COVID tilted to that, where now workplaces are not waiting for OSHA to put things in place. They're listening to their employees and saying, okay, we gotta be more proactive. And it's good and bad. It's good because they're taking care of their employees like they should have been, but also, why did it take so long? But that's
always say, why ask why?
Yeah, that's been really promising.
Which industries do you think are leading the way? If any of them are, or if they're all, because for so long, people didn't want their employers to even address it, because if you address my mental health, that puts a stigma on me. If I go to you and ask for I'm having a problem, I'm really stressed at work, well, maybe you're not good enough for this job. That's an old way of thinking. But so are there industries that are leading the way?
Because we're focused on hospitality and healthcare, we see both of them leading. We see both of them implementing things like the hotel panic button laws in healthcare. There aren't even mandates, but they're coming forward to say, all right, we need to protect our workers, and implementing solutions like ours as an example. And I think also in tech, I have a lot of friends who are also tech CEOs, and all of us are always talking about what more we can do, because especially now that more tech companies are remote, people are working longer, even when you tell them not to, even when you have policies about shutting email off at a certain time or not emailing people on the weekends and being truly off when you're on vacation. Do not check email.
It's so hard not to, I know.
And I think it's important that we unsubscribe to societal norms about always being on. I had to have a talk with one of my team members about it, because I noticed that she was saying that she worked on this and that on the weekend, and I had to pull her aside and be like, why? What's going on? And she would apologize when she call off sick. It's like, why are you, if you're sick, you're sick. Go take care of yourself. Don't apologize. And so, yeah, I think the tech industry too has been leading in making sure that there is a clearer line between work and home, especially as folks are remote.
That work-life balance comes up often. It's funny that we're talking about this, because I had this conversation a couple of hours ago with my daughter. For those of you listening, I live in South Florida. We're going through a hurricane event right now. And my daughter told me her boss says, well, you got to come in here. I said, really? No, you don't. Why? It's a hurricane. Schools are closed. But she and many people misunderstand a good work ethic with an unhealthy work-life balance. It sort of gets a mishmash. Well, if I call in sick, I don't have a good work. Like you said, you're sick, you're sick. There's a hurricane, there's a hurricane. Stay home. It's for your own safety, and you should be, people need to.
That's interesting, right? Because to me, that's not even work-life balance. That's just human decency.
Well, you've dealt with bosses before.
Yeah.
Some of them are not equal. They're all not built equal, as we all know. But sometimes you have to, put your foot down, and you have to understand that yes, your work ethic that tells you want to. I need to check my email even though I'm on vacation. I know it's Saturday, but if I get this done, my wife's a teacher. I know 80% of teachers work all weekend long, work till 9 o'clock at night. People
Yeah.
don't realize how many hours teachers put in. And
I will say I am encouraged by the new generation because I think Gen Zs had been much better, at least from what I see, at setting those boundaries to clearly say that when they're done, they're done. Like if it's 5, whatever it is,
right.
and when they are not feel like they're less likely to apologize. They make sure that they are very clear in their expectations there. And it's interesting because I have people from all ages at my company, and the folks that are older are used to, like, you power through it when you're sick. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've told my SVP of sales and marketing, like, hey, like, go take care of yourself, take the day off. I was like, no, we got to get this done. I'm like, no, please go. I don't know how I'm begging someone to take off when they're not feeling well.
I understand. I've been on both sides of it. So
yeah,
because I've been a teacher, and I'm like, I understand it. We don't want it good. We want it Thursday. What? Okay. So we talked a little bit about, because this was very interesting to me, because you're a person who's very technologically aware. And the panic button to me was very interesting. That has to relieve a lot of stress, knowing that, okay, that little button gives me a sense of safety. I can call for help. As a teacher, we have a button in every classroom to call the front office if I need help with a kid. And I never thought about it. Maybe the technology didn't exist. Maybe now it does. That now we can do that in other industries as well. What are some of the other things that do besides that panic button that improves people's sense of safety and alleviates some of that stress in their workplace?
What else besides the button?
Yeah.
That's a good question. So
is it just programs that are available? I mean,
yeah, well, I think there's a lot of training. I mean, I think it really depends on what's going on in that facility. We see a lot of people start with a risk assessment to be able to gauge the environment, talk to the workers, and identify the gaps that need to be fulfilled. What's been interesting is every time someone asks for advice about having safer workplaces, I always say it starts with leadership. What we notice is our clients, if it's not the general manager or it's not the CEO, COO that we're working with someone that might be lower level, it's not going to have the same urgency and the same engagement as if the leaders from the top are engaged with a culture of safety. Leaders lead by example. So it's really, really important to have that from the very top. And then the best advice I give anyone on making sure that a safer workplace is to listen to their workers, because they know best what would help them feel safer. And I know it's a simple tip, but you won't believe how often people bring in experts and consultants from the outside to get an assessment from them. It's also really important to not retaliate against the workers that come forward, because unfortunately that happens way too often. And sometimes they're actually punished for doing so when it comes to the performance review time or pay raises, where because they came forward, they're less likely to receive those benefits. And then just regular training programs, because we hear from folks that will do sexual harassment training once a year, or conflict resolution training maybe once every 5 years. You can't just do it once and that's it. It has to be something that, it's like a muscle. You have to repeat it. You have to go through it again and again for it to really be able to be reinforced with that employee.
And one of the best things that I've seen happen, and you can correct me is that I start to see that people who are in charge, the CFOs, the CEOs, and stuff like that, are now paying more attention. It's
Yeah.
coming, mental health and stress issues of workplace stress are coming out of the dark ages. And it's being okay to say, hey, I got too much on my plate, I'm overwhelmed, I'm whatever, without having that stigma attached. And that, I think, more than anything else, is really, really helping people. So they're just saying that it's
Sure.
okay. The other thing that I thought was very interesting, we had a guest recently talk to me about this, say that they're making some things mandatory. It's genius. If you make it voluntary that I have to go to a mental health workshop, I'm not going to go because I don't want people to think that I need that. But if you make it mandatory, and in fact, there was a police officer who said if his department made mental health checkups every year mandatory for every police officer, all the stigma is gone. You don't have a choice. You got to go. And I think that's a great improvement in the mental health environment in workplaces. Now, I understand that Roar was involved with the technology, with the panic button. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Tell us about Roar. Tell us about what it does. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
sure. And
great.
there's a little bit of background noise, so I'm hoping it doesn't come through. But yes, yeah. So we're 8 years old. We are focused on protecting at-risk vulnerable workers and people in workplaces. And essentially, we have a panic button platform where we provide staff members with discrete, small, silent alarms that they can wear on them. So think about that silent button that you had underneath the desk, except now it's wearable. So it's on you at any given time. You don't have to go to that specific location or press it. And the whole idea is that if something happens, there's a situation you want to de-escalate, you see a guest in trouble, you're injured on the job, there's a medical emergency, you're stuck in a linen closet, you're attacked, harassed, you can use this to summon help to your exact location, down to the room and floor of where you are. So that even if you're running from one location to the next, you're tracked so that other staff and security can come to your help immediately and expedite the response time.
Is there a size limitation?
What's that?
Is there a size limitation? How many employees?
No, nope.
You know, because you said to me, as a teacher, that button underneath your desk. It's not. It's on the wall where every kid can see me push it, and then I have to speak into a speaker and tell them exactly what's going on. I think your way is a lot better.
Yeah.
It gives me a lot more peace of mind knowing I could just push that button without anybody knowing I did, and somebody just show up and come in and just by their presence de-escalating it. So your way is actually would be great for schools too.
Yeah. Well, here's something that's been really interesting. Just the knowledge of our system existing in a hotel or healthcare facility so far has actually reduced the number of incidents. So we have signs that we add, especially to behavioral health facilities, where we say, for the protection and well-being of our customers and employees, this facility provides safety buttons to its staff to summon help when needed. We've even had members like point to their button when they're wearing it around the badge and say, hey, see this? Don't make me press this. So just the knowledge that exists it basically serves as a deterrent, like an ADT sign.
That's awesome.
I think that's pretty great. And I do think it is important for kind of like the CCTV camera and the ADT sign. The more people are aware that it exists, the less likely they are to engage in unruly, behavior that lead to needing to press that button.
I don't know if you have, but one of these days, if you haven't, you have to do a study on one of the premier, and I use that term lightly, work environments that were really unsafe and very stressful, and how that stacks up once they get your program in place. I would love to see that and read that. If nothing else, that should tell people, that first of all, that employer cares. That's enormous.
I'll
that they're
send
willing
you
to
a
spend.
case study because when we entered healthcare, we actually did do a survey pre and post. We installed, and it was pretty amazing to see the difference of employee satisfaction, workers' comp. We this particular facility, the first one in behavioral health, incidents reduced by 39%. Workers' comp claims by 24%. And this was really important, not just because the system basically paid for itself by reducing the number of claims, but also because it meant less people off of work. And among this labor shortage, crucial in terms of being able to provide better patient care. It also
And those statistics are only against people that actually reported it.
Yeah.
How many people never reported it? So your statistics may even be higher.
Well, they're even now using it as a recruitment tool. So imagine that you're a nurse and you see one under benefits, it says 401k and safety buttons, and one place does it, one place doesn't. Where do you want to work? It signals that they take care of their staff. And so that's been really incredible to see as well.
Well, Yasmine, it's been great talking to you about this because we talk about the work-life balance and stressful work environments all the time. When people contact the American Institute of Stress and for information and things, work is way up there. It's one of the top, I'd say 3. Sleep, work, relationship. I mean, it's up there. So if you can make people like yours and Roar can make the workplace a less stressful place by just making it a safer place. It does enormous good. If my nurse doesn't have to worry and she feels good, I might live another 5 years. That's important to me, guys. Leave them alone. Yeah. So I can't thank you enough for joining us today, telling us about Roar, and telling us about all the other things that you gave us insight on. A lot of consequences we don't think about.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. This was fantastic.
It's my pleasure. And again, if you're listening to this or you're watching this, go to roarforgood.com. I think it's will open your eyes to a lot of things and give you an opportunity to maybe, if you're in that position, to help make your workplace a lot less stressful. So thanks again. That's going to do it for today. Thanks again for joining us. This has been your host, Will Heckman, and I want to thank you all. Please don't forget to follow us, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, follow this podcast, send in a review, make a comment. Please be kind. I'm very fragile. And remember, your support is what helps make these podcasts and all the things we do at the American Institute of Stress possible. And I also want to remind everybody that just as stress is different for each of us, there is no one stress reduction or management strategy that is right for everyone. So that means you need to turn in next time. And as we explore more techniques and tools and give information to help you live a healthier and happier and maybe a longer life. So I hope the information you heard today from Yasmine and myself will help you find contentment. Good day, everyone.